Thank you. I would also like to express my appreciation to fine young people from the Project for the New American Citizen. And this is yet another event in a busy season for the 9/11 Truth Movement. We've had conferences in Dover, New Hampshire, in Phoenix, Arizona, Irvine, California, South Bend, Indiana. Those are the ones I know about. And Vancouver, British Columbia, coming up towards the end of June. Now, as I was rushing to get to the airport in Washington, D.C., I heard the voice of Dick Cheney on the radio talking to WLS Chicago. And he said he wanted to remind everybody how important it was to remember 9/11. Don't forget 9/11, says Dick Cheney. And I think that's something that we all need to consider. We absolutely have to remember 9/11, and we have to attack the myth of 9/11, which is at the root of the present world predicament. We have a double constitutional crisis. That's just for starters. The double constitutional crisis is, on the one hand, the fact that you've got a regime that considers itself to be absolute and autocratic. It doesn't submit to any kind of congressional or parliamentary oversight. You can send them a subpoena duces tecum that says you show up and bring the documents, and they respond with a Cheney-iac reply, a Cheney-iac unprintable gesture. That's one prong. The other prong, of course, is the funding of the illegal Iraq War, where the opposition has not shown itself to be very valiant, to say the least. But we have a double constitutional crisis. Now, that's the least of it. We've just had a brush with a wider war with Iran. And as far as I can see, based on what I know, the brush with the wider war occurred in the week before Palm Sunday. And we know this from The Guardian, the British newspaper. They tell us that after the 15 Royal Navy personnel were taken into custody for, I believe, violating Iranian territorial waters, the United States approached the Blair regime in Britain with a list of military actions, and this included out-and-out acts of war against Iran. The list itself is still secret, but on the list we know there were violations of Iranian airspace, other provocative actions, further violations of the naval space. The fact that the war did not escalate is due to the fact that the British government was not as crazy as the crew we have in Washington. And of course that means the Cheney-iacs above all. Now, we are operating under a warning that was delivered by Zbigniew Brzezinski, of all people, on February 1st in his testimony to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He warned that there was an operative scenario to start a wider war with Iran. That the three steps in the scenario that he knew about were, first of all, benchmarks in Iraq that would not be met and that would be blamed on Iran. That we've had. Secondly, a provocation in Iraq that would be blamed on Iran. That's the 15 Royal Navy types. And thirdly, a terrorist act inside the United States that would be blamed on Iran. And that's the one I invite you to focus on. A terrorist act inside the United States that will be blamed on Iran. Now, unfortunately, there is no real opposition. A real opposition would have said, not so fast, Mr. Brzezinski. You're going to stay here and you're going to tell us everything you know about this. How do you know it? Who told you? Who's doing it? Let's find out. And similarly, if the London Guardian, which is a reputable newspaper, prints the report that there's a list of acts of war that the United States government submitted to Tony Blair saying, let's start World War III, there should be emergency hearings going on right now about that too. And we don't have that either. So, the only question that's been perplexing me lately is when it's supposed to start. I originally thought March 18th, the new moon. If you're going to have a sneak attack, do it in the dark. Then came April 6th. There was a big worldwide mobilization led by Russian intelligence and my friend General Ivashov of Moscow that April 6th was a day of grave danger. There are other reports that say the month of April in general, a time of great danger. And finally, yet still other reports that say the U.S. Air Force personnel are largely tied up in a bombing campaign in Afghanistan, and as soon as that's over, Iran will come under air attack. And that one says the end of May.